discussion on this as long as things don't get out of control. My thought is that this will be somewhat interactive. It's not a public hearing. We're not going to have real rigid rules. We'll give people opportunity to speak from the public. We'll have staff members and board members speak to issues regarding the future building needs. We'll deal with that first, and anything then about incorporation efforts we'll take after we're finished with that. A bit of background, and I think there's some pieces of paper on the back table there. I'm not sure they're enough for everybody, but you could share them. But just a little bit of background to some of that. In 2017, in the spring of 2017, the then town board retained the architectural firm of Angus Young from Janesville, Wisconsin. We had a selection process that had, I don't remember, 8 to 10 respondents, something like that to it, Kathy. We whittled that down to 3, conducted interviews and selected that particular firm to assist the town to look at some future building proposals on this property. The town paid, my recollection is between $12,000 and $13,000 for those services that were rendered during the spring and early summer of 2017 over a course of 2.5 or 3 months. There was significant involvement in that from staff and several board members. Their work product that they ultimately delivered, and I think there may be some of these, it's on the website, it's in the packet, but they prepared a drawing with a site plan that showed a new public works building on this property back generally in the area where the recycling area is. They showed a 2-story addition to the front of the building out in front of the existing fire department bays on the far north side of the building. They also showed a salt shed on the drawing, which was directly behind the existing freestanding masonry public works building behind here. I don't recall exactly, but there were multiple renditions of the public works building, the fire station addition, which also included an increased bay size for future equipment. It was an iterative process where that process ended up was not where it started. So there were refinements and changes made along the way. In addition to that, they provided some very preliminary and, I won't say crude, but some very preliminary cost estimating, which the town used for purposes of developing a capital plan and a capital budget. In the fall of 2017, we can look at the detailed numbers here in a minute, but basically what it was proposing to expend a little in excess of $1 million to do the fire station addition and to provide emergency generator for this particular building, that to be constructed in 2018. And that was approved as part of a capital budget for that expenditure. So the budget was only a 1-year commitment to put a capital plan extending out for 5 years from 2018 to 2022. And there was another $1 million plus put into a capital plan for 2019 to build public works building. That's rather loosely said. The thought of incorporating an emergency generator into this facility goes back to 2011 or 2012. So that's some 7 or 8 years that did not come to fruition. In December of 2017, shortly after the capital budget was put together, the town board chose not to proceed with retaining the architect to prepare plans and specifications to go ahead with the fire station addition. And largely that matter has been on hold since then, so that's some 2-year plus period of time from late December of 2017 to January here of 2020. In a minute, we'll move to the discussion. If any of you looked at the packet of information on the website, and I'm not sure that those were copies of it back there, but there's a single page document, you can't see it from back there, that I put together to try to focus some of the discussion for this evening, and that posed, and I'll just do it very quickly to kind of set the stage for things that people might want to comment on, but it posed several questions on there. And before we walk away and conclude this tonight, it would be my hope and desire that each of the 5 members of the town board would weigh in on which of these things they might support or consider priorities. And quickly, those were, and I'll paraphrase them a bit, but one of them pertains to the construction of an addition to the existing fire station, which was sleeping rooms bay expansion, that being generally to the east side of the front of the building there. Another one was about support for the installation of an emergency generator to at least serve the fire station, a minimum. The town board has talked about that a number of times, including the scope of it. Should it be the entirety of this facility? Should this facility be considered a emergency government operations center or what or not? So there's been a lot of banter back and forth on that, but no resolve and haven't moved forward. Third question or general topical thing would be regarding the construction of a new public works building, a new structure. Fourth one is just looking at alternatives, and that would be in lieu of adding to the fire station here for fire department needs and constructing a new public works building. Would consideration be given to explore the feasibility of constructing a new fire station and then utilizing the existing fire station component in this building for public works purposes for existing garage space? And then the last one, which kind of a bit stands alone, but regarding the need or support for construction of a salt shed on the property here again, and Jerry Noley, Director of Public Works, and others can speak. We have minimal provisions here in back. He talked about retarping that very small facility currently. Our salt storage is at the county out on Grandview, so we go there and retrieve salt for use. So that's just kind of laying some of that out to kind of set the table or set the stage for discussion. We can, I guess, proceed with that at this point in time. And again, I envision this as a very open discussion. I think members of the town board need to hear from the public, from residents who've come here to speak. We can proceed with this at any point in time. If anybody from the public is prepared to come forward, please do. We may intersperse that with comments or questions from the town board, but if everybody's comfortable with that format, I'd like to leave it loose and informative. So, that said, somebody want to break the ice and come forward and tell us what you're thinking, what is and what isn't a priority? And I think on this again, please give names and addresses so we know who's speaking. The other thing, just last real quickly thing, the other thing, we're not going to engage in a debate. I expect there are people who have different priorities, different expectations. So those of you who come to publicly speak, if you would pretty much address your comments to the front of the room. We want to keep it loose and informal, but it's not going to end up being a debate. Okay, go.
Mike Orchard, West 231, South 5205, Hunters Hollow. Looking at the conceptual plan there, the only comment I had, this plan was out over a year ago. If you look at the plan, it shows one lane for the yard waste facility or disposal. Right now, we have 2 lanes that are accessible to the town residents. And even with those 2 lanes, it gets backed up to the road sometimes. And the 2 lanes are working. Some people only have a few bags, some people have large quantities, so they're on the inside lane. The idea of going to a single lane is going to, in my opinion, back up the yard waste facility quite a bit, and there's gonna be some upset people. I've seen it on 2 occasions already where a couple residents almost were going to fist between each other because they couldn't get along up there, and that's with the 2 lanes. So I just want to bring it to your attention, something to consider. I understand this is not a permanent plan, but I believe that having 2 lanes, as we do now, is the best for the town residents. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Just one comment, and maybe even the board members want to jump in on it in terms of the big picture part of it. We've had some of this discussion. It would appear to me, at least in its infancy discussion, there are all kinds of options. The first question that it maybe begs is, should the town continue to operate a yard waste facility on this property? If so, should it be located generally in the area where it has been for an extended period of time? Should it be located someplace else on the adjacent property? Should the town discontinue providing that service? And obviously this comes with cost implications, but some communities, I think Vernon and others, do it twice a year. Pick up, do we do pick up in addition to allowing drop off or what or not? So Mike's points are good there, but you might even look at that as a bigger picture item than that. Members of the board or anybody want to talk about yard waste at all, or we want to move on? Okay, somebody else, come on up, please. I see a whole lot of bashful people that I think want to speak out there. Name and address, please.
Sure. Jerry Borg, West 238 South 5370, Chestnut Trail. I don't know how much you can do all these projects in what sequence. I would think it would be logical to do the fire department needs for the housing, and that first, if you have to spread this over 5 years, like, I'm really disappointed that this has taken so long to get going. And I'm disappointed to I don't know how long it's gonna take to start it. And I don't know what you're gonna put resources in to do it again. But I think it really needs to get going and not put off again. I don't know that I should ask the public works guy. The salt storage to me is not a priority. If you have a system that's working and they have to go get it, like the yard waste, you have a system, you have a backup to go do this. To store salt and have a building for that, I don't know how much it's gonna cost. And I don't know how much it's gonna save. And it's gonna take up space. So, in looking priorities, I would take the salt shed off the agenda for now. If somebody has dire needs that, we gotta do this, because it's such a short season. Can you use any of the information you've already paid for to get this project going? You go back to the company in Janesville or whatever and say, can you look at this again now? We're in 2020, and this is what we think we want to start. And I had heard previously maybe that you're getting a new fire truck that won't fit in the fire department stall right now. I don't know when that's gonna happen. Maybe that's hearsay, maybe I was wrong on that. But I would think that if it's a bigger truck that can't fit in where the other trucks are now, and you're gonna keep the fire department the way it is, you could build something in the general maintenance building to store that longer truck if that's happening, I don't know. Do you have a new truck ordered that's gonna be here in 5 years? That's super big?
Nothing has been ordered. We can dive into that a little bit better and explain it. Nothing has been ordered at this point in time, and we may even have Chief Buchholz speak to that in a minute. Let's leave that
Okay.
on the list, looking for a response. Okay.
No.
Oh,
Okay, thanks.
did you, hang on, Kathy's question,
You have your paper?
did you fill out a piece of paper for us?
Yeah, I just got a name and address.
Will you hand that in? You could win something tonight. Just salt for your walk. Just a couple of quick things, Mrs. Badgett, before just response so we can move along. Maybe other board members, not in any the particular order. Thank you for your comments. You raised the issue of prioritization. We need to have a lot of people speak to that tonight. I mean, that dives into the whole issue of needs, wants, and lusts. What do we need? What's prioritized? Where do we spend the money? The good news is, I think, and many people in the town of Waukesha deserve credit for it. The town of Waukesha is debt-free, which is an enviable position in which to be. I mean, we have a debt-free loan from the county. What's the residual balance? $8,000 or something, give or take. It's a interest-free loan, so technically, are we debt-free? No, but that is, it amounts to much about nothing. We do have cash and reserves in a capital fund. We will have a year-end closing balance on that in the near future. That is something, I think, comfortably north of $1.5 million, which sounds like a lot of money, but if you look at, and we've had a lot of discussions about capital plans, when we look at road repaving and when we look at equipment needs and so forth, is our appetite a little bit bigger than our pocketbook? I think that's fair. So some of this may need to be prioritized over a bit of time. It's prioritization in the big picture. I mean, there's certainly options out there to borrow money at fairly cheap interest rates. I mean, we're not going to resolve that discussion tonight, but the very thing talked about prioritization. A couple of things just real quickly. I think just informationally, I mentioned the architectural firm that we retained in 2017. The contract with them, the agreement, the obligation was just to do some of this very preliminary work. So they completed their contractual assignment. The individual architect that we worked with, and we pretty much worked with a single person, is no longer with that firm. I'm not sure whether anybody else knows where he went to. So at this point in time, we're not obliged or committed to go back to that firm because of the passage of time. We've lost a little bit of that continuity. Okay, anybody else want to speak to any of those issues? Or if not, come on, I made you stand up and sit down 3 times, kindly.
It's good for my exercise.
All right,
Betty Paget, South 57 West 226.
you're real close to the microphone, please.
Woodside Court.
Thank you.
Better. Presently, the fire department has room for their trucks. Their trucks are inside. The Department of Public Works, those expensive trucks out there with salt on them now, are sitting outside. Now, if you had, at home, you had a place to put your car in the garage, but you bought another car, you didn't have a place for it, would you build onto your garage? Or would you build a new garage? Or would you redo the garage you have for the car you already have and leave the other one sit outside? What I'm concerned about is it's costing the taxpayers money as those trucks rust out there.
Okay, thank you. Chief, you want to come up for just a minute because the question was raised, so we don't get too far astream, but the issue about or describing about the size of equipment and what that might mean for building to store it in, please.
Part of the
capital plan that we propose is when we replace our rescue truck, which should have been replaced already. The truck is so out of date. The radio equipment it carries has been switched over completely, so that's out of date. And our engine is coming up to be replaced. The intentions were to combine those two trucks into one truck, basically moving to a smaller truck for a command unit and incorporating all the rescue equipment into a rescue engine then. By doing that, that rescue engine is going to be longer than the existing engine. The bays that were built to house the existing engine were basically built to house exactly what was there. There is no room to put the larger engine or longer engine in the bay. The other intent of moving part of the garage is the ladder truck clears the doorway by 3/4 of an inch. We have to make sure the snow is shoveled on the ramp before that truck goes in and out of the door, or we will take the door down. So part of the intentions were to construct the building to accommodate that truck, to get the door high enough so that we didn't have to worry about the 3/4 of an inch. Is that helpful?
Cool. Well, yeah, I think so. Anybody else questions of Chief or want to jump into that particular issue? Hang here just for a minute. One of the concerns, and this gets a bit deep into the weeds, but as long as we're there, a concern that I have got the Angus Young plan. There are copies of that about, and I printed almost to find a read on it, but it's July of 17 or something, I think, isn't it? What's the date on that? You see that? Anyway, beside the point. But if you look at that, that showed an extension of the bay, the long bay where the ladder truck is in now, and it showed, and I'm just estimating this, I don't know, was that 25 feet or something like that, give or take, just kind of estimating, but extending that further to the east. One of the concerns that I've got that might have been overlooked when we put this together, and Supervisor Durr and I and former Supervisor Wolf worked on this with the architect, but if you look at the state building code, my belief is that the size of this building will be limited to 12,000 square feet of floor area unless it is sprinklered. Right now, this building is not sprinklered. In fact, we're not even on a municipal water system. We're on municipal sanitary sewer as of 5 years ago, something like that, but we're still on a well. We don't have a sprinkler system in this building. If we went on municipal water, could that be done? Sure, that's going to cost money to do it, but without a sprinkler system, I believe we're limited to 12,000 square feet. I don't know exactly, but the existing building, I think, is something north of 13,000 square feet right now, so that's current regulation. The only way that you can exceed that in the building size, as best I know, without a sprinkler system, is if you have firewalls to separate it into separate compartment kind of things. It would not be too difficult or too costly to effect a firewall between the east end of the big bays down there where people go and have the pancake breakfast. That outside wall, without too much difficulty or expense, could be made into a firewall, but that ends up being problematic, I think, in terms of extending that bay area. So that, I think, would be something that would have to be looked at closely to see what those implications and cost implications would be, and not to put a damper on that, but that's kind of a little bit of a reality check. Okay, who's next? Anybody on the town board want to chime in or want to continue to listen? Okay, next speaker, come on up. I find it hard to believe that there's just all bashful people in the room.
Hi, Sandy Hamm, West 23, South 3827 Milky Way Road. It seems like we spend a lot of time tattling but not going anywhere on some of these items like the generator. And I hear some of the comments, and it is interesting. You can look at it one of two ways. I mean, so we've gone 9, 8 years without a generator. Is that proof we don't need one, or evidence that we're living on borrowed time? I don't know. And so, you know, we've had this plan for the fire department going on many, many years, and yet every month we get the report, and every month we put out fires and make calls, and so is there a need or not a need? And the fact of the matter is, I don't know. I'm certainly not qualified to know. And I think that we need to be looking at least a 10-year outlook for the fire department. I think that the town needs to have that. I think the people that work and volunteer for the fire department need to know what the plan is. And, you know, I think that, you know, much as there'd be an urge to move forward, I'm not certain that we know where we're gonna be in 10 years. And I would certainly encourage some, you know, real serious thought about where we will be in 10 years. You know, will we be expanding the fire department? How much is our population gonna grow to support spending the money? Or are we looking at other options? I'm just not certain. I'd like to know what Dan thinks, the fire chief thinks about where we will be in 10 years, and he probably wants to know where you think we're gonna be in 15, 20 years. Because I think that's what the meeting tonight is about. I mean, I don't think 5 years really takes us out far enough when you're talking about the kind of money that you're talking about for a fire department. So, you know, I encourage you to kind of think about that. And, you know, it is curious when things go on. It's like you move somewhere and you box up your stuff and you move there and you don't unbox it, you move to the next place, you don't unbox it, pretty soon you figure you don't need the stuff. Well, if a year goes by and a year goes by and a year goes by and you don't need the generator, well, maybe you don't need the generator, I don't know. Anyway, I really, you know, I know this is a really difficult decision, but I don't think we should be spending $1 million, $2 million, $3 million without knowing what's on the back end. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Dan, do you or any of the people from the fire department, I know we've heard the case presented times before for response time, for recruitment, vision for the future. Maybe you can even explain, I know there's countywide study that was done. I mean, what do you see as a vision for the future for town of Waukesha? And I think one of the things maybe can you speak to, we speak so much in terms of fire department, but part of the evolution of this is that you actually have far more runs, do you not, that are ambulance calls and paramedics, really even more than the fire department? I mean, can you flush some of that stuff out, or any of the other people who are here to tonight to make the case?
We first mentioned living quarters in the firehouse back in 2001. We talked about it with the last addition that went on the building. Back then, we had a roster of 50 members. Today, we have a roster of 35 members, and it's shrinking. It doesn't increase. It's harder to get people who live within 10 minutes of the firehouse to be members of the fire department to get here. It makes it difficult to recruit paramedics. Paramedics are looking for a place where they can have some stability, and they just aren't in the neighborhood. You search to bring them from other places. Part of our long-range plan was to move from intermediate service to paramedic service, and we worked out an arrangement with Vernon to share paramedics. Unfortunately, we have not increased our paramedic population in our department as quickly as we had hoped, so we're struggling to keep that operation in place. To go to an intercept program and pay for intercepts, we're probably looking at about $100,000 to $140,000 a year added to the budget to pay for an intercept. That's annually. Our response times in the county report were some of the longest in the county. If a 15 to 20 minute response time to your home in emergency is acceptable, we can probably manage that. But if you expect something more realistic for an emergency, until you have people that are here at the station, we wait 8 to 10 minutes sometimes just for people to get here. It's a need that's been in place for a while. Like I said, we talked about this back in 2016 when we put this plan together. We had a good meeting with the town board to lay out some plans for the future, which included having people here at the station on a pretty regular basis so that we could improve our response times and provide the service that people think that they're getting.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of Chief Buchholz from the board? or-
Yes, I have one. If we were to go ahead and put this addition on with sleeping quarters and things like that, do you anticipate that it's going to take care of the recruitment problem and get people to join the department and stay on as paramedics?
I can't make any guarantees, but what we've seen the trends in other departments, it has sure helped and it's relieved a lot of the pressure. We are one of 3 departments in Waukesha County that has no living quarters. Folks that have put them in have them staffed. Many of them have put in like 4 rooms and said they wish they'd have doubled that because they could have them full every night. Their response times are immediate. They get out the door in 2 and 3 minutes. They're out the door and rolling. So the trend in folks around us, it has shown that it does improve the situation. Yes.
Okay, other questions of Chief Buchholz? Thank you. I mean, any other fire department people, as long as we're on that topic, want to weigh in? Please.
Wayne Wolke, S45, W226, Georgetown Place.
Get real close to the microphone, please, because we want to make sure we hear what you have to say.
Okay, I haven't seen any of this before, it's the first time I've looked at it. But it seems to me we need to prioritize this stuff. Is the fire department what we really need for this town? Do something. Or do we need to stop sitting trucks outside where they're getting rusty? Do something about it. That's the way I see this. Just to prioritize all these jobs and make sure what everybody wants is what you really need, not what people just want. Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much. Well spoken. Anybody else? Come on. Come on, come on.
Lori Kurth, S31, W25, 109 Green Valley Drive. I would hate to be a person having a cardiac arrest or bleeding out, and I can't get a response from my fire department or paramedics for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I could be dead. We don't know what the future's gonna bring. No one knows that. All we have is now and what we can say. I feel we need to have a fire department that's functional for its citizens, and also to have our trucks for our DPW sheltered.
Okay, thank you. Chief, a quick thing, don't mean to make you jump up and down all the time. You don't have to come up with this one. Well, I guess you can, but I am making you jump up and down. But correct me if I'm wrong, I'm paraphrasing it, but Waukesha County, and some people might have seen it, they commissioned a study, and I may not say this in exactly correct words, but they commissioned a study to look county-wide at the future of fire and ambulance, paramedic, EMT services, correct? And the town of Waukesha was not it's fair to say, I mean, we were not a significant participant in it. I mean, is it fair to say that some of that initiative was driven by communities and fire departments north of I-94 there and everything. I mean, there was more driven by that than others. Is that fair or not? I don't want to mischaracterize it, but there was some driving force or impetus behind that.
That's where the project originated,
And-
that's how it started.
And maybe that is not particularly relevant, but that study, or my recollection of kind of what they looked at in different ways. I think one aspect of it was to look at where facilities should be located for response times, and I think they looked at existing fire stations or emergency services locations. In my recollection, I don't remember which ones, but they suggested that there might be some that could be duplicated, could be eliminated because of location or whatnot. My recollection of it is they indicated that a facility to provide emergency services, whether it's fire or ambulance, EMT or whatnot, needed to be basically in this location, that this couldn't be simply eliminated. They, I think, looked at even trying to take a perspective of it and said if you eliminated jurisdictional boundaries between communities, what would the model look like? I mean, that certainly is a thought-provoking type of thing, but there's an awful lot of things that make that are impediments to make that happen. But the bottom line on, did they basically not include that into the future, that there probably needs to be a facility in this general location? Am I correctly representing that or not? That's a long question.
Pretty well, yes, this department was slated on both models that it would be here,
Okay.
well into the future.
Okay, thanks. Okay, who else? Any other fire department people want to share your thoughts with us?
Yeah, Sandy Hamm. I just wanted to, I didn't catch the woman's name, but she said, in case of a cardiac arrest or bleeding out, she would want a functional fire department. And I think we have one, and I think it's, fair to say that we do. The question is simply, what is the response time that you want to pay for? And do you want a helicopter to come in and medevac you to Freighter, or do you want to wait 12 minutes? I mean, it's all relative to what you want to spend. And, I'm sure there are response times for the town and response times for everybody else, but I would suggest that we have a functional fire department and EMT services. And I haven't heard of anybody dying while the ambulance was en route. So I'm very supportive of what they're doing, and I don't want to say anything to denigrate what's happening here. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Who else would like to speak? Name, address, and close to the microphone.
My name is Bill Kraus. My address is S42W25253 Dale Drive. I know the DPW needs coverage for some of their salt trucks. I get that. But we really do need a sleeping quarters. I personally have had to call 911 for my wife having an allergic reaction. I had to give her an EpiPen. It took our ambulance, knowing it was going to my house, a long time, because every second feels like a minute when you actually are having an emergency. So if we can cut 5 minutes of my feeling like it's taking forever off, I think we should do that. The other thing is I think you had brought up about using the current fire department for DPW and getting it modified enough so that they could fit all their trucks inside the fire station and then build a new fire station. Did I hear that correctly, or?
I just tossed that out as a possibility, a possible option to look at.
I really think that's honestly a great option, because then you guys could take care of two things at once. You're able to fix anything that's wrong with the building for the fire department, or in the fire department, and get it set up for the DPW. You'd be getting a building for the fire department so that you can have a generator without having to deal with all the electrical issues and woes of having a building that's been added on to umpteen times. And I think that might just actually be a really good idea, personally, I think.
Okay, thank you. Who's next? I sense there's a lot of people out there that want to speak yet.
I'm sure there
Am I
are.
right?
I'm Ken Hartling. I live at West 224 South 4372 Guthrie Road. I've been in the town since 1971. I've seen this building remodeled. I do believe the fire department needs their building so that the DPW can take over this building because we need the growth. You just have to look around and see how the town is growing, and we need to meet the service of the town and the residents. Salt shed, the county's got a multiple use salt shed being built, a huge one. We should have a salt shed for first truckload, or once our trucks get on the road, there's no reason they can't get refilled out of the salt community shed. We don't need to build a big shed and have the danger of the runoff from the salt leakage in that, in our community.
Okay, thank you. Just a quick comment, well, next speaker's getting ready to come up, just a quick comment. It's not perhaps a huge item, but in terms of salt shed or salt storage, the DNR regulates salt storage, and appropriately so, because they're concerned about infiltration of chlorides from the salt into groundwater supplies. And I think Kathy can attest to it. Our little bitty, and it is a little bitty facility with the fabric cover in back here. Jerry can tell us a bit. I mean, we can put a little bit of salt in there, but not very much. We get inspected from time to time by the DNR on that. Is that correct? Can you add something to that? Yearly, annually. We actually have I'll call it a waiver, a special dispensation from the DNR to store salt there because it is too close to our well. We have a private well right behind the building here, okay? And I think you have to have 500 feet of separation unless you have like a special permission for that, which we do. So we're legal with that. They've consented to do it. But for good reason, we need to be good stewards of making sure that gets cleaned up. So that's an issue going forward if we were to build a larger salt storage facility on this property. At what point in time needs to be considered proximity to that well? Do we continue to try to get a waiver for that? Do we build it so it's distance apart? If and when we were to ever go onto municipal water instead of the well here, that issue might go away. So there's a couple of sidebar issues on that. Who's next? I know there's people out there that want to speak. They're just getting ready to come up.
Terry Bork again, West 238 South 5370 Chestnut Trail. I don't expect you as a board to make all these decisions. I think you probably would get a consultant, as was suggested, to look at the whole plan, look at the whole project, and then narrow it down, and then give you direction, and give you choices. So my perception is, we're throwing this at you as a board to come up with, okay, we gotta do this, 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 and this is how we're gonna do it. But I think you need a third-party overlook. I know people don't like spending money for consulting, but if there's value in it, and we're looking at time projects and estimations that we can't come up with that a company could, and I don't know if that's more than one consulting company to look at the fire department issue, to look at what you want to spend and when you want to spend it. So I'm assuming, or I'm hoping, and I think you've done this in the past, you just don't do something as a group. You get as much information from professionals to go forward. Because we all have ideas, but it's not our building, it's not our budget. And we are, at least I am, expecting you to be the gatekeeper of the ideas by using professional consulting on a project that's kind of beyond a couple people's opinion. I know you do that for an architectural drawing to see what we'd have to do, but once again, projection ideas would be helpful. You know, using the information that a consulting company would give you. That's all. Do you do that in the past? Have you sought knowledge from?
That basically was the path that the board walked down with Angus Young, okay, which we didn't implement.
Right.
Time has passed, they maybe revisit, but I mean, just hitchhiking on what you said, I mean, my thought, and I'm projecting it here, I think we do need to spend a few bucks. We need some architectural engineering services to develop some concepts or preliminary things, probably look at options. I mean, we're gonna go in a bit on this before we wrap up, and kind of take the temperature of members on the board as to what they would support or favorable, in fairness to it. If somebody wants to say, hey, I want to see how much that option would cost, what's the cost benefit ratio, how do we implement it, how do we finance it, what's the timing of it, and those are fair reservations, but we can't use those kind of things as just impediments or excuses not to move forward, in my judgment. But yes, we need some professional consultation, because I mean, we could whip and throw numbers around here, ones that we have had in the past or what or not, and simply be doing a disservice and fooling ourselves. So if your point is we need some professional help, conceptually, preliminary, to look at things, to bounce them off of people, get additional public input, absolutely.
And does our village status have anything to do with anything of what we're talking about tonight? Or are we gonna go forward with this as a town and not worry about annexation and let that fight out?
I'll answer that and let other people jump into it. I think that is, from my perspective, I think that is those are largely separate issues. There may be some connectivity. We get to it a bit, but from my perspective, and I want other board members to jump into it, the purpose of attempting to incorporate as a village, I think, is pretty simple, and it is to preserve the territorial integrity of the town of Waukesha in perpetuity, which means no more land loss to annexation from abutting communities, because if we continue to lose land, we lose tax base, we lose revenue. It may take decades, it may outlast some of us, but it's going to be death by 1,000 cuts to the town of Waukesha, in my point of view. I guess the connectivity to it is, do we want to protect the integrity of the town of Waukesha so it exists for decades to come? And if we do, the best way to do that is through incorporation, so we don't get chewed up. And then, does that mean we need some of these long-term facility needs? I think that's the connective part of it. But other board members jump in on that. Do you see those issues as connected in any significant way, or are they largely separate?
I see them as largely separate.
Anybody disagree?
Other than the fact that if we don't get village status, I don't think we'll exist in 50 years as a town, through the death by 1,000 cuts.
So kind of the reverse on that is, if we think that the town's future going forward, and maybe for many years isn't that bright, then what do we need to do? I mean, the kind of thing, when you build facilities, the kind of thing we're talking about, a lot of these have anticipated useful service lives that could be 40, 50, 60 years. I mean, the very building that we're in has been renovated, but I mean, look at the cornerstone when you walked in. What's the oldest one, 1958 or something, this part of the building? I mean, there was a 24-foot expansion, but I mean, the part of the room that everybody's sitting in goes back, I mean, do the math, 42 and 20. I mean, it sounds like 62 to me, so a lot of those are long-term investments.
Thank you.
Good questions, thank you. Board members, I don't want to dominate this whole thing. You want to start to give some thoughts?
Sure, I will.
Other people come up and jump in, please.
So ultimately, to me, what this has always come down to is the money. We hired the consultant, we went through that whole process, and basically they came back and told us that to do the whole project, the DPW, the salt shed, the fire department, was about $2.5 to $2.75 million. And that's just money that the town of Waukesha doesn't have. So then you get into, we tried to do some other things that the board couldn't come to a majority conclusion on. We tried to do a DPW building that would be substantially smaller, and that didn't work out. At the time that we went through this with Angus Young, for the most part, the park was determined to be off limits. Over the course of the last couple of years, we've had a substantial change in the board. There was talk about moving the facilities to a different location, so that was voted down by the residents. But the fact that at least 3 of the members of the board were in favor of moving the town campus to a substantially smaller acreage footprint tells me that the park is all of a sudden not necessarily off limits. So I think we need to start looking at options that would put some of these facilities in the park. Because the work that we did with Angus Young and pretty much declared the park to be off limits, I think drove up some of the cost of what the modifications to this building and replacement of the DPW would be. I think we should look at putting another building over in the park because frankly, I think we could build a simple block building or something even akin to a house over in the park that would accommodate the fire department and significantly drop the cost. But ultimately, that's what this comes down to, is how much money can we spend over the course of the next 5 to 8 years to get this done? I mean, frankly, at the December 12th meeting, I presented a modified capital plan that had $1,600,000 allocated to firehouse construction over the next 3 years. $40,000 for this year, $80,000 for next year, and then $1,500,000 for 2022 to try to bring that to resolution. It also included $200,000 in 2022 for a salt shed, and then finally in the 2 out years, 2023 and 2024, for the DPW building, all within reasonable close proximity to the level that we see current taxation over the next 5 years. I don't know if anybody's looked at that, but that has to be how we determine our priorities. To say that, oh, do you support a salt shed? Well, sure I support a salt shed. Oh, do you support the fire department sleeping quarters? Well, sure I do. Oh, do you think we should put the DPW vehicles inside? Well, sure I do. But we don't have that much money. It's just the reality of the situation. So to sit here and look at a checklist about what my priorities are right here in the capital plan that I presented to the board, and it's pretty clear cut. So that's how I think we need to look to reduce costs of the things that we need to do without spending $1.5 million or $1.25 million on fire department adjustments that even the chief says, well, I can't guarantee it. Well, if we do $1.5 million to modifications to this building, and 6 years from now we're still at 35 firefighters, we're stuck with all that money, sunk into a building that becomes somewhat of an albatross. So that's what it comes down to, is money. We shouldn't be looking at this from what we want. We should be looking at it from a point of view of how much money do we have and where do we want to spend it. And that's why the board hasn't come to an agreement, because we haven't been able to come to an agreement about how to do that.
So just a question, your proposal or capital plan, you'd go in expenditure of money and so forth, and that means you'd go fire department before public works.
That's what I had in the plan that I presented on December 12th.
Okay. All right, who's next?
Andre McMillan, South 40 West 22216, Rolling Oaks Terrace. So, first I want to say, you should, looking at this plan, I can see a couple of solutions that may be able to kill 2 birds with 1 stone right away. So, you were just saying that you were going to spend 1.something million on renovations, but I'm not sure how much it costs to build a building. But looking where that the new vehicle storage building is, if that was rotated 90 degrees towards the bottom of the page, and you made that for the fire department, can't the Department of Public Works then take where the fire department is currently? And then you could also allow the Department of Public Works to maintain the few areas that they have. But if your first bay was for their large or new fire truck, that would give them direct access out to the main road to be able to have a faster response time. But I'm not sure if there's regulations saying that they need to be so many feet away from a road or access. And it also help with the first guy's comment on the trash pickup, because then it will allow you to use this side to be able to maintain two things once you get further up. Because I'm assuming that's what this is.
And when you're saying this side and you're putting the dry, you're talking about north of this existing building,
Yes.
I think, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So if on the north end, you allowed for trash pickup to come up on this side and put like the dumpsters or whatever the heck you're dropping in this area, you can still probably get two lines and still be clear of where the fire department comes out. I don't think you'd be able to move forward with this plan how it is, because with my limited knowledge of what needs to happen and what each department needs, I don't see it feasible, and to me it doesn't make sense. In my defense, my background is in engineering, so looking at this print, my head automatically goes to how can I improve it? I am not an architect, but I do see a lot of waste here in this plan that, once again, with my limited knowledge of the needs of each department, can be reduced with planning a little better. And I do think that you need the generator for the fire department, because just because it hasn't needed in 5 years, I mean, I haven't crashed a car in like 10 years, but I still have car insurance. So I don't think that makes sense to get rid of a generator, because it's not, oh, it hasn't happened in 5 years, it's a need for whenever it happens. So with that being said, I think you guys can come to a conclusion if this was reworked completely. And yeah, this needs a lot of help. So I understand how, looking at this, you guys didn't come up with it. You know, it's been.
That was the consultant's recommendation.
All right, to me, this doesn't make sense. So, but that's just
Okay.
with my limited knowledge and my engineering eye.
That was great. Thank you for your comments. I was going to lighten the spirit of the room a little bit. Is anybody who doesn't have auto insurance, would you like to raise your hand, please? I was going to say,
The officer's still here?
I was going to say, if you don't have auto insurance, stand up, but I guess that's about 10 people in the back of the room who'd jump for a chair in a hurry. Two quick things. Thank you for those insightful comments. Couple of quick things, and again, we're looking at big picture, looking at details. I mean, for those of you who are familiar with the back of the building here, straight out the back here, I mean, you can see it right over Supervisor Durr and Supervisor Stigler's shoulders. There's a little freestanding building that's been there a long time. I'm going to be judgmental now. I don't think it's the prized possession of the town of Waukesha. It is the home of the sheriff's squad car when it's not on the road. Is that right, Captain Moonen? Is that the nicest garage you can ever park in, right? I mean, it's kind of a piece of junk. I think any part of a plan, it's not a big part of the plan going forward. There's also a unheated metal building in the back there that was built many years ago economically on a slab that actually tilts that has garage doors, the bottom panel of which are trapezoidal in shape. I mean, that has some utility to it, but I mean, there's a reality of a lot of things to look at. Maybe a quick thing, Jerry, not to put you on the spot, but I mean, there's been a little bit of conversation, just your thoughts off the top of the head about public works space, whether this end of the building, other end of the building, fire department, would that, I mean, first blush, and we obviously go to consultants and stuff, does that have any potential to be usable for public workspace to get things inside if the fire department goes someplace else?
I would think so.
Something to think about, okay. I mean, one of the things, and let's get some more speakers up here, I appreciated Supervisor Durr's comments. I mean, if one thing comes out of this tonight, I think it might be that we really could benefit from some professional help and look at options and look at what the money would buy. We really need some help to do that, and I mean, realistically, to get something that's worthwhile, we, in my judgment, need to probably spend between $10,000 and $20,000. I mean, that's a significant sum of money, but if we want something worthwhile, we're looking at big undertakings here, significant expenditures of money. I think we need professional help. That's just my point of view, and that might be the first step. We're not going to resolve anything. Who else would like to speak? Or other members of the town board jump in any place?
I'm just gonna say that I kind of agree with Supervisor Durr in part. When this plan was drawn up, I believe, like you said, the park was off limits, the ball diamond was off limits. It was not a popular thing to build in there. And I can't really support this plan completely either, because we're shoving, the old saying is 10 pounds of goods in a 5-pound bag, and that's what you're trying to do by sticking another building back here. And that was kind of the reason why we thought about moving to another facility, putting the building up over there so we didn't disturb sacred ground on this property. But if that's a doable thing, I believe that's the thing to do, is to use the open space we do have here for, you know, I think we need to look at building a new fire department. I'm not saying that's what we're gonna do, but I think, as you said, we need to get a consultant involved, get some price estimates, what it's gonna cost, and do it within our budget. And I'd like to see the Public Works building get someplace to put their trucks in. We can do all this in one deal and spread the cost out. I think that's the way to go, in my opinion. But I do believe a consultant would probably help us get some direction as to which way we should go.
Okay. We have another speaker ready to go.
Betsy Novak, S44, W25357, Red Oak Drive. Good evening. I really appreciate all the comments that everybody's had here. I do want to just say one thing. I really do think that our outlook and what Mr. Hamm said, we would be really good to look at our future. And the one thing I do disagree on is that the village is separate. Getting to the status of village is separate, but that is a big piece of this puzzle, because if we don't get that, and we've all then decided we're going to approve and do everything that we're going to do, and then we don't get that's not going to bode well for us, because we just spent all this money, put it into these projects that we're never going to see fruition on maybe, because we're going to just not be here as a town anymore. I do think that we do need somewhere to put our, trucks underneath something. I don't know if the salt shed is that important. I mean, I know we go to Waukesha right now. It doesn't take that long to fill it up. I mean, I think that the firefighters would like somewhere to sleep to get the response times down. Maybe somebody that lives 20 minutes away now can be a firefighter, or I don't even know if there is anybody in the town. I know it sounds like I'm rambling, but I don't have all the answers either. And I do agree that looking into the future, getting a consultant, I like what Mr. Stigler, what Mr. Dewar said about it. And I think, again, it's as taxpayers, we have to be good stewards of our money. when I redid my kitchen, man, there were so many things I wanted. I wanted everything. And then the cost came in, and I'm like, yeah, well, that's not gonna happen. I had to really pick and choose what I wanted, and I think that's really what being responsible government, being responsible citizens is all about. And, I really think that we have to look at our long-range plans. I really hope we get that village status. I think that would ensure everything, solidify things, and make people feel better about where we're gonna go forward from that. So thank you.
Thank you. Just a comment maybe about the interplay with the incorporation and future facility needs. And we did put this on. Kathy touched on some timing things and so forth in her clerk treasurer report. The incorporation effort, and again, Attorney Macy or Clerk Treasurer Nicholas could speak to the issues in some detail. We're attempting to do that, as are other towns in Waukesha County. You've probably read about that. I mean, Town of Lisbon, Town of Brookfield, Town of Vernon, Town of Oconomowoc, and us. Did I miss anybody? So 5 townships are attempting all to use the same provision in Wisconsin state statutes to incorporate as villages from towns. And that statute sunsets, I mean, it was a specially carved out thing, and we don't need to go into the details of that, but that opportunity ends on the 30th of June. I mean, that's a little over 5 months away. We've been working on that for what, 6 months, give or take, 6, 7 months. It's a long road with many things to do. It's an uphill climb in some respects, things that are left to do on that yet, and she touched on that. We have to have cooperative boundary agreements with a minimum of 2 adjoining communities. We're trying to effect those with 3. Town of Brookfield, Town of Vernon, Town of Quantico. And some of you have been to those public hearings where we put those in place. Town of Waukesha on those respective communities. We're on the same page. We're going forward. Those are formalized plans. Kathy did that, but we'll reiterate it. There will be a public hearing in the town of Brookfield on the 11th from 4 to 7. Public comments are invited there. They pretty much need to be the fulfillment of the requirements by the Department of Administration, not just people rambling on. Similar public hearings for the Vernon and McGuanago ones, those are required by statute. Those things are in play for 90 days, right? The Department of Administration has to make sure those are all in place, and the clock started running on those. Typically, we're most of them in December or thereabouts. So the resolution of those won't be known until March. That's one part of it. The other thing is we need to create this tax incremental financing district, sometimes called a TID or a TIF. Some of you have probably seen that. And we're using a portion. There's been 2 public hearings on that. The first one actually extended over 2 months of meetings. The last one was Thursday, 2 weeks ago on the 9th. That is a very fluid situation that has to be approved by a joint review board of 5 people. Supervisor Durr and I are on it representing the town of Waukesha. There's also representation from Waukesha County, WCTC, and Waukesha School District, because they're the 3 other taxing entities that are involved in it. That next meeting of that will come on the 18th of February in this very room, and I believe that was at 10 a.m. I think we established that at 10 a.m. That, I'm sorry, what?
It's going to be in the fire department.
Oh, Kathy, correct me, maybe down in the fire department or something. That's actually election day, so a little conflict, we'll work through that. But that is going to be a very pivotal day. We need to get that plan approved for the incorporation effort. And if all of these pieces of the puzzle get put in place, The decision on whether to do that or not ultimately rests with town residents, and there would be a referendum. The timing probably will not allow us to get that on the April ballot. It would probably have to be a special election and may very well fall into June. The big picture part of that, we will know before the 30th of June. We'll know the destiny on that, whether we're going to be incorporated as a village or not. So on one hand, I suppose you could say, well, that has much more of a time, I mean, that has time certain. Some of these facility plan stuff doesn't. Even if we retain a consultant, it will take a matter of months to look at different options and so forth to do it. So are they somewhat connected? Yeah, but I mean, the incorporation thing, hopefully for good rather than bad, but that will be resolved within the next 5 months one way or the other. That's just the way it is. Okay, who's next? Please come forward.
Richard Ryan, West 250, South 3321, Center Road. So there's been a lot of talk now that Hamm might become a village, and it sounds like a good deal because you're going to protect the borders from annexation from certain entities. Now, I live in a town island. Are we going to be protected as well?
Yes.
In the city of Waukesha.
Understood, and I live in a town island as well, okay? If we are successful with this, the borders basically would be frozen where they are, correct, Attorney Mason? And that would include all town property, including town islands, everything.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next. I see a bunch of people out there that I don't really think are bashful. We're gonna let Mr. Borchard speak for a second time, but anybody else gets up, they get to go first, right?
Okay, Mike Orchard, West 231, South 5205 Hunters Hollow. I appreciate all the time the board is putting in, and I know this corporation has got priority. When we do or get to some definite decisions as to what's going to happen with the facilities here on the property with the fire department, DPW, etc., I think it's important to move forward as soon as possible, because I've been involved with construction for 30 years, worked on projects from $25 million to $50 million, and I know that the cost of materials in construction are not going down. They continue to go up. So the longer these projects get put off, the more it's going to cost the town in the long run. And I understand there's a budget, and you have to look at the cost of what we're going to spend. But when people build a house, they take a loan out. A lot of companies do expansions, they take a loan out. So I think it would be important when the time comes for the town to look at taking a loan out to get the projects done that we need. Because if you don't do them now and pay some interest and you put them off, it's going to end up costing you more later on. And then it might be even a wash. And then we're still waiting for different facilities. So I'm just asking the board, when the time comes, to consider the possibility of taking a loan out, a reasonable amount, to get these projects moving. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Board members, public.
I'll make a couple of comments, Mr. Chairman. I think that incorporation is, and I think I can speak for the board, we've all stated that we're for that, but regardless of how that goes through, and there's a very good likelihood we aren't going to get that, we still are going to have these needs. So if the pleasure is that we need to put sleeping quarters in for the fire department, then I think we should move forward with that. I'm not opposed to a different type of structure for it. It could be as simple as, a house in the woods. I wish there would be a way that we could try it out to see if that's really going to solve any of our needs. We've explored trying to buy properties nearby. We've explored the condo across the street. We looked at the old fire department. And the good thing with those would be if it doesn't work, you can sell it and move on. But I don't think we're at that point where we can do that anymore, so I believe that we should get some quotes on a valid fire department sleeping quarter. and start moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Next speaker.
Could we put something on next month's agenda? Instead of just discussion of this? Some type of possible action to move forward with it?
Well, that certainly is absolutely, we can do that. I mean, we can put anything on the agenda that they want. The question is, what do you put on the agenda, and do we talk about ways about solicitations for a consultant and that type of thing? I guess I would think that would be the starting point. Maybe you have something different in mind, but sure. I mean, on some of this, I mean, notwithstanding the incorporation thing, we certainly can walk and chew gum at the same time.